Hey YouTube, it's Zemos here, and today I want to talk about my Thunderclap Skywolf deck. This is a fun deck built around, this card Thunderclap Skywolf that, I heard the internet talking about it a couple months ago and tinkering with kind of how obnoxious, good use of this card could be, and, people trying to build some stuff around it, so decided to, dive into it and play it a bit myself. The deck is built all around this card, Thunderclap Skywolf, which is a monster that says if this card is special summoned from the graveyard, you can destroy all face-up monsters your opponent controls, which, is a pretty powerful effect, and, you can easily turbo this thing into the graveyard, and there's so many ways to special summon this card out on an opponent's turn that, it's actually a pretty obnoxious strategy. This is definitely a deck that if I tinkered with it a bit more, and worked on the ratios ideally, I would consider playing this deck at a local event just to catch some people off guard and have some kind of wacky gameplay because my experience playing it so far, it's pretty good at what it does. So definitely a cool option to have in my deck arsenal. Pretty fun, annoying way to just make sure your opponent can't have a field, and you know also the monster itself looks pretty cool, so that's awesome. So with that, we're going to go into it. First, we're going to go into our monsters. Starting off, I am playing two copies of Thunderclap Skywolf, the namesake of the deck, the big payoff of the deck. I already talked about it in the intro, but Thunderclap Skywolf is a 7-star 2,500 attack monster that just says if this card is special summoned from the graveyard, you can destroy all face-up monsters your opponent controls. You cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this effect. So basically, it's a monster that if you could summon it during your opponent's turn and blow up their face-up board, their face-up monsters, is quite an interruption to a combo play. So in this deck, we're looking to throw this in the graveyard so fast and, send one out. We're playing two copies of Thunderclap Skywolf because we need to at least have a copy of this card, so we can't afford the one to just get called by the grave. And also, it is very possible and likely to resolve multiple of these in, while one's on the field, you need to summon another one, which is pretty cool. Almost considering playing 3, but it can clog a bit, so 2 is where I'm at with it right now. So yeah, dump this in the grave, summon it on your opponent's turn, blow up their face-up monsters, make it hard for them to play. Next, I'm playing 3 copies of Batteryman Solar. This is basically one of our main ways that we get it into the grave. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can send a Thunder monster from your deck to the graveyard. That does include Thunderclap Skywolf, which is who we will be sending. And then, of course, if a Thunder monster is normal or special summoned while this monster is on the field, you can special summon a Batteryman token, a Thunder Light level 1 token with 0 attack and 0 defense. And you can target one Batteryman effect monster you control in your graveyard. This card's name becomes that. Not an effect that's important. Basically, the only effect on that card that was important is that it sends a Thunderclap Skywolf to the grave. Summoning the token is actually a bit of a pain because there's not too many ways for us to get tokens off the field, but you could, use the extra deck to make things like link, to make some link stuff, but it kind of doesn't fit with the playstyle of this deck, so mostly the token is a hindrance, but that's okay. You can get rid of it, deal with it. But yeah, we want to get Batteryman Solar to dump Thunderclap Skywolf into the grave. And to help us get to Batteryman Solar, we are playing 3 copies of Thunder Seahorse. Thunder Seahorse just says you can discard this card to add 2 level 4 light thunder type monsters of the same name with 1600 or less attack from the deck to your hand. So it's essentially more copies of Batteryman Solar because any Thunder Seahorse will get us 2 Batteryman Solar, which is what we need to dump Thunderclap Skywolf. If not, if you already have Batteryman Solar, you can Thunder Seahorse into Thunder Seahorse to thin your deck. Very important because we want to make sure every draw counts pretty well. So the only thing to, of course, note is that you can't special summon the turn you use this effect. So if you have a Thunderclap Skywolf ready to go, keep that in mind. But, that's not a big drawback, and we definitely want to see Batteryman Solar enough that we are playing this to get to it as quickly as possible. And that is it for the monster count. Very low monster count. It's a demise stun style trap heavy deck, so low monster count. Next, we are going to talk about our spell cards. I am playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. This is the godsend to these kind of stun, anti-meta, non-extra deck, heavy decks. Pot of Extravagance turns our extra deck into card advantage. We can banish 3 or 6 random face-down cards and draw a card for every 3 that we banished. So, 6 extra deck cards become +2. Very nice to have. You have to do it at the start of main phase 1, and you can't activate any other draw cards after that. Not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. So very glad to have Pot of Extravagance. Next, we are playing our 1 copy of Card of Demise, a card that would certainly be looked into more if we could play more copies, but as it is limited, we are only playing the 1. Card of Demise just says draw cards until you have 3 in your hand. And, then for the rest of the turn, your opponent doesn't take any damage. You can't special summon the turn you use this card, but then at the end phase, you send your entire hand to the graveyard. So this deck is very trap card heavy. Most of those cards will definitely be able to be set. So Card of Demise can easily just be, a +2. Grabbing trap cards from the deck that we can set. We don't have to special summon much on our turn, especially since we're trying to save the wolf special summons to interrupt the opponent. So, the punishments are not that bad, and also the discard effect will get a dead wolf in your hand into the graveyard, which is pretty important to do. So, glad to have that. And next, to boost consistency, we are playing 3 copies of Pot of Duality. You reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 to your hand, and shuffle the rest back into the deck. You cannot special summon the turn you use this card. Again, a drawback that is not that punishing. And Duality is nice because it's not draw power, so we can use it with Pot of Extravagance. And Duality just allows us to get the 1 key combo card do we need. Do we need Batteryman Solar? Do we need a specific trap card? Do we need Card of Demise because we haven't played Extravagance this turn? Duality gives us the chance to see some stuff and pick what is best. Very nice little consistency booster that seems like an obvious include in this kind of deck. And that is it for the spell cards. Next, we are getting into our trap cards, a large chunk of the deck. Keep in mind before we start that since we are playing a lot of trap cards, we are very vulnerable to cards like Royal Decree and stuff like that. If, keep in mind that if folks in your area are playing cards like that or have them sided, you're going to need to have the appropriate side measures to deal with those cards. So getting into our trap lineup, we're going to start with all the revival traps we are playing. We are playing 3 copies of Call of the Haunted, a continuous trap that will special summon a monster from our graveyard in face-up attack position. And then, of course, if Call of the Haunted is destroyed, that monster is destroyed, and when that monster is destroyed, Call of the Haunted is destroyed. Not too big a deal. Call of the Haunted, bring out Thunderclap Skywolf. Thunderclap Skywolf will activate and destroy all face-up monsters the opponent controls. Pretty good interruption, and we got a 2,500 attack body to follow up with. So 3 Call of the Haunted to special summon. Pretty good. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Oasis of the Dragon Souls. It's just Call of the Haunted, but it special summons the monster in defense mode and makes it a worm-type monster for some reason. Not a big deal. We don't care about it being a worm-type monster. And even though it's in defense, it will still trigger Thunderclap Skywolf, so we want to play it. And then, of course, last, I am playing 3 copies of Back to the Front. This is a trap card that just targets a monster in the graveyard, special summons it in defense position. That monster is going to be Thunderclap Skywolf, who's going to destroy all face-up opponent's monsters. So, definitely want to make use of that. And then another cool thing about all these revival traps is that if your opponent does have an open board and we have all these revival traps, they have to end on an open board and you can possibly OTK. You can use all the revival traps on other monsters as well, just to get the attack power you need to finish the game. Next, gonna play, showing off some Mirror Force cards we are playing in here. Um, Going all in on the game-winning blowout package by playing 3 copies of Drowning Mirror Force. Drowning Mirror Force, if we don't have Thunderclap Skywolf, is a pretty good, huge blowout option we can go with. Um, if we don't have Skywolf, we probably have an open field, so when an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you shuffle all your opponent's attack position monsters into the deck. Very powerful effect. If you can resolve this, you're usually in a really good spot. Usually puts lots of decks incredibly behind. And, it can get destroyed, but, the payoff is worth the risk. You got to go all out for something like this. And I've been very happy with Drowning Mirror Force so far. And then next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Storming Mirror Force, just the next best Mirror Force we can do. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, return all your opponent's attack position monsters to the hand. Also pretty obnoxious, not as powerful as shuffling them back into the deck, but a little less restrictive, so it's a good card. If you find the restriction on drowning to activate too much, you could play 3 of this instead. But, just another way outside of Skywolf to just clear an entire opponent's board. That's what we're doing in this deck. We're clearing an opponent's boards at all times, at all costs, so we are playing that as well. Next up, playing a little a solemn package here. We are playing 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. Thing about a deck like this is it's a very one-note deck with a 1 strategy. It can be pretty fragile to a select few cards that somebody may be playing. And if we see any of those cards, we want to say no to them right off the bat. So we are playing 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. Be very careful what you use your judgment on, because you'll need this to save you from cards that will otherwise probably end your game. Definitely a necessity, definitely a card we want to see. Solemn Judgment to answer the outs an opponent may have. We want to be prepared to stop that. Continuing on, I am playing 3 copies of Solemn Strike. We pay 1,500 life points to stop a special summon or a effect from activating. We usually want this to deal with things that are either going to negate our cards, or, we want to stop the special summon of a monster that will negate, or just stop a combo so that we can leave our opponent on an open board. We want to see this card, 3 Judgment, 3 Strike. You won't be able to resolve them all, but for consistency, we want to see as many of these to have them handy when we need them. So we are playing 3 and 3. The Solemns are very important because you gotta answer the things that are gonna stop your deck, and try to end the game pretty quickly. Next up, kind of the reason I am comfortable with running all these Mirror Force and all these situational traps that could get destroyed before they're activating is because I'm playing 3 copies of Waking the Dragon. This deck has so much set back row, there'll be a lot of opponents who might want to side Twin Twisters. If they see you're playing Mirror Forces, they're going to start blind hitting stuff, and if they blind hit Waking the Dragon, in the right setup, you can just auto win the game, and that's a pretty good reason to play this card. We want to punish our opponent for destroying back row, and Waking the Dragon does that. When this card is sent to the graveyard or banished zone because of an opponent's card effect, we special summon a monster from our deck or extra deck. So we'll fill our extra deck with Waking the Dragon win cons. Very cool alternate win strategy in here. And then last, I am playing 2 copies of Heavy Storm Duster. This is for pesky back row decks, or answering specific cards. For an exchange for your battle phase, which lines up with Thunderclap Skywolf, so you don't have to worry. You might have to skip your battle phase already. But in exchange for doing that, you can destroy up to 2 spell and trap cards on the field. Hit your opponent's 2 back row, hope they're not playing Waking the Dragon, or, answer a card, a continuous spell, or a field spell that would search when it's activated so they don't get it. Very good to keep in mind. Something I need, so if you're not worried too much about back row, maybe you can skip this card for something else. in general, this trap lineup, you got to be ready to adjust for what you need. You know, maybe cut back on some mirror forces for more spell and trap removal, more effect negation. I would just say that you definitely need the revival traps, and the solemns are usually probably always a given. But that's it for our trap cards and our main deck. Next, we are going to go into our extra deck. Do note that the extra deck is mostly for extravagance fodder, so we are going all in on our Waking the Dragon targets, of course, since that is a real crucial part of this deck working out. Do note that some of these cards in here you could switch out for some rank 4 XZs and whatnot, because Batteryman Solar and Thunder Seahorse are level 4s, so getting 2 of them on the field can become any rank 4 XZs that requires 2 material, so keep that in mind, and we'll get into the specifics of the monsters here. Starting off, I am playing 3 copies of Last Warrior from Another Planet. This card, if your opponent destroys Waking the Dragon, they have an open board. You can summon Last Warrior from Another Planet. Then neither player can summon monsters. You know, can kind of be a game-winning card. You can poke down if they don't have spell and trap removal to get rid of this card. Well, that'll be tough on them. So not always the best option, but in some matchups, it will win you automatically, and that's the kind of cards we want to be summoning off of Waking the Dragon. So Last Warrior from Another Planet, and we're playing 3 copies of these cards, of course, because we don't want to banish them all off of Extravagance. Next, I am playing 2 copies of Naturia Exterio. This would be 3 if I had 3, but I only have 2 copies, so that's just what we're going now. This is a card for you to summon off Waking the Dragon if your opponent is very dependent on spells or traps for their deck to function. Naturia Exterio just reads that you can negate any spell or trap card by banishing a card from your graveyard and then sending the top card of your deck to the graveyard. So, you know, and it's not once per turn. You can negate as many traps, as many spells as you want. Very cool. Very useful to have. And to make up for our 3rd copy, we are playing 1 copy of Naturia Beast. Naturia Beast is just Exterio, but only negates spells for 2 cards off the top of the deck. Spells is mostly what you need to negate most of the time, so Beast is usually good enough. So if you needed to go into it and banish your 2 Exterios, you would summon this Beast. Otherwise, always go with the Exterio. Next, I am playing 3 copies of Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon. You know, this is a 3,500 attack monster that is unaffected by card effects. That makes it pretty hard to deal with. You either got to battle over it or kaiju with it, and sometimes that just wins the game. And so we'll go into that. If we have banished all our Ultimate Falcons off of Extravagance, we can go into the next best thing, which is Geomathmech Final Sigma. This card could also be Armor Master, the Blackwing Full Armor Master card. This card is essentially a 3,000 attack monster that's unaffected by card effects while it is in your extra monster zone. You're not really using it for anything else, so we can gladly summon it into our extra monster zone. And of course, if this card battles an opponent's monster and does battle damage by that battle, it does double the battle damage, which is pretty cool. Sometimes there may be a reason to go into this over Ultimate Falcon if that double battle damage attack is going to win you the game. Pretty good to note. But yeah, 3 copies of that. And last, to round off the extra deck, we are playing 3 copies of Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon. This is a 4,500 attack monster that cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. Not as good as being unaffected, but sometimes those 2 protections are enough, and the extra 1,000 attack will be gladly warranted. Alternative Ultimate Dragon also has an effect where instead of battling with it, you can destroy a card on the field. Pretty cool, little flexible spot. So yeah, definitely like having this fill out space on the Waking the Dragon extra deck. And that's it for the extra deck. So that is it for the Thunderclap Skywolf deck. Again, you know, pretty linear deck, but the effect of Skywolf is so powerful that, you know, an unexpected opponent could easily just get wiped completely by these forms of interruptions. Just this level of bullying an opponent's field before, you know, they set up into extra deck monsters can be pretty big, and, you know, getting out multiple Skywolves per turn. or you know, another Skywolf on another turn. You poke, Skywolf gets removed, you resummon it. Um, so it's a very powerful card and definitely makes a fun build around. Like I said, this deck has been doing better than I expected for it, enough that you know, sometimes it succeeds against pretty legitimate decks. Oh, also as another note, that Lord of the Heavenly Prison card that just came out might be a big help for this deck to, you know, if you don't have Waking the Dragon, prevents all your sets from being destroyed. Definitely something to keep in mind. But yeah, very cool way to use this big thunder monster. I like the Thunderclap cards quite a bit, so was happy to have this. And yeah, I'm glad to show it off. Well, I hope you'd enjoyed it. Let me know if you like Thunderclap Skywolf too. And I'll catch you all in the next one.